Everybody, welcome to today's show. Today we are talking about where is adoption taking place in the world, and then we're going to talk about some traditional finance versus Bitcoin. It's going to be a good show. Strap in.
Andrew, how you doing today?
Good. Lenny, are you a coffee guy or a tea guy?
I'm a coffee guy, and I made this shift from I used to be like creamer, ton of sugar. Now I'm black, no cream, no sugar, nothing.
What kind of coffee does it have to be like a single origin? Does it be like, is it Folgers? What is it?
So man, you're hitting something that I'm very passionate about.
Seriously?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, very passionate about this. I believe that all that stuff is ridiculous.
I thought you were going to go one way and you zagged.
I hear you. I'm like, because I have this idea about like even beer. Like people are like, oh, I love the taste of beer. I'm like, man, I believe that's an acquired taste. Nobody actually grows up.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like, like you aren't born, and like if we stuck a bottle of like with beer in it, maybe we'll spit it out. Like that's like terrible, right?
Sure.
So I have this thing that if I have to go through the effort of acquiring a taste to enjoy something,
my wife believes the same thing.
Right. And so when I hear and I get into these conversations and people are like, oh man, like whatever, it's got this special cafe they got to go to, special coffee that they got to drink. And then there's this whole kind of like rituals to stuff. And I'm like, that to me is ridiculous. Right. And
so what do you drink? What kind of coffee?
So I honestly, I like in India, I'll drink like Nescafe Gold. I'll take it. No big deal. Give me a cup of Nescafe Gold. I'll drink it. Right. I'll drink regular Nescafe. Okay. I'll drink, I'm not one of those people that is going to go to like, I need to take a special trip to special cafe to get it. Like, and that's not me. All right. I know. Yeah. And I have like 1 cup of coffee a day. I have it in the morning. Right. If I don't have a cup of coffee, it's not the end of my day.
Sure.
Right. Okay. So but I don't drink tea.
Oh.
But that's not something that
no chai.
Big tea.
You're on the side of the
Growing
road.
Up,
chai walla's sitting there. You're not like, here's my 10 rupees.
No, you know what? I'll do it as, hey, you want to go hang out?
Sure.
And that's the place, right? Yeah. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I won't say no to it if friends are like, hey, you want to, yeah, let's go do it.
Sure.
But it's not the, I don't need to do it every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I think it's kind of like,
so
anyway, that's my.
I lean toward the opposite side. I'm a coffee guy every day. I do it in a certain way. I like what I like, but I'm also not to the top of like, this was picked by hand by an uncle and on the Himalayas side of Nepal, and he did it with clean beans that he picked and grew from his tree 60 years ago that his grandfather planted, and all of those things. Like, that's cool. But I do like a good coffee shop. I'm pretty passionate about coffee. I don't know if I can say it. I will drink some Nescafe Gold if somebody nicely hands it to me, but I'm not going to buy it.
Oh my gosh. I might actually.
Nescafe Gold.
I might have finished my 1 bottle of Nescafe Gold, but
that cracks me up.
I'll make sure not to serve that to you when you come.
If I'm in India on a nice monsoon afternoon, I'm going to grab a cup of chai and just watch the rain drizzle. Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. But now, like when I go to Calcutta, you kind of have to have it in, like little cups on the side of the road, and like
it's like a cultural experience.
Yeah, it's a cultural experience, and I'll of course do that. But you know what's great? Can I tell you about this conversation? We are two people on opposite ends of this spectrum, but we can agree on one thing, and that you might not agree with Nescafe Gold, but you can agree with Bitcoin Gold.
There you go.
Right?
BTC Gold.
It brings people from different viewpoints, different places. It brings them all together in agreement to this common space that we could all agree on and how great it is. So I'm glad that we're on this call together. I'm glad that we're friends and we can have these conversations.
I love it.
Yeah. So how you doing? Good?
We're good. We're good.
Ready for today?
Yeah. Let's talk about some stuff.
Yeah. What are we going to talk about today? Do you want to prep it?
You were talking to me about what's going on in India. And Lenny lives in India. I lived in India for a couple of years, haven't been in a couple of years, but Lenny's been there since 2016, right?
2015,
2016. Yeah. And I live in the Middle East, and there's different perspectives, and we're both Americans. So we come from this country that is trying to wrap its head around what crypto is, how to regulate it. The Middle East, where I live, they're like inviting people, hey, come start companies. We want it. We wanted to regulate it, but regulate it to support you and not try to take everything from you, which is kind of the perspective of other countries. And so I was talking to Lenny, and I was saying, hey, like, tell me about the scene in India, because I haven't been in India since 2020, and there wasn't much of a crypto scene then.
Right.
And so 4 years later, like, what's going on?
So, it's interesting. And we were having this conversation, and I threw it out there, and I said, and that I love the discussion about adoption.
Right.
I really believe the key to success and for growth is adoption. I think that you would agree about in any market, any product anything you have, right? Like, people aren't buying it, it's going to fail. Right. So if people aren't getting into Bitcoin, or people aren't getting into crypto, it's going to fail. If no one's right. So that adoption is not there. So I started to look at it, and I want to play this little game with you to kind of prep this. Right. And I went to Chainalysis. Love them. They gave great information. I took they provided this list of the top 20, right? Global crypto, they have an adoption index. It's the top 20 for 2023. And so I thought, hey, maybe I'm going to ask you if you can guess, right? What countries are in the top 10? Not even the top 10? Okay? Top 10. Right? So I'm going to ask you to guess that. Okay?
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead. Shoot it. No. Think about it.
Okay.
Adoption. Okay. Yes. Go for it.
Okay. I mean, America.
It is. It's number 4. You'd be surprised. 4. You thought it was number 1, right?
I did think it was number 1.
No.
All right.
Unfortunately, in terms of adoption, it's 4. Yeah.
What about where I'm at in the Emirates, United Arab Emirates?
Surprisingly, not in the top 10. Surprisingly, it's not in the top 10. It's actually not even in the top 20. Right. Wow. In terms of adoption. Remember, we're talking about adoption. There's a few things for adoption.
Okay. I'm going to say El Salvador is probably like top 5.
For 2023, not on the list.
Whoa.
Again, surprising. Yes. Surprising. Right.
I mean, Bitcoin is legal tender, and it's not in the top 20.
Not in the top 20 overall index ranking. So here, let me tell you what they're using is, right? So maybe this will help you. Here are some of the factors, right, that they look into. Centralized service value received, retail centralized service, right? Peer-to-peer exchange trade volume, DeFi value received, and retail DeFi value. So there's a bunch of things there. Okay.
But well, I'm bad at this game.
You're bad at this.
So give me.
I'm going to give you the 10 from 10 to 1. Okay. So number 10, Thailand.
Really?
Right? It's number 10. Yeah.
I love
And
Thailand. I go yearly, and I'm surprised because I don't remember seeing any crypto stuff happening.
I think they've started to open up also, right?
Maybe.
In terms of, right? And so 10. 9, Brazil.
Okay.
Is
I've heard
number
that.
9. Number 8 is Pakistan.
Crazy.
Is 8, and I've heard of that also. Indonesia,
Okay.
right, is 7. Philippines, number 6. Ukraine is number 5.
Okay.
Which, like, I don't know how much is legal and not over there, but
it doesn't matter.
Number
the Americans will send them money, and somebody will take it and stick it in their pocket.
Exactly. The United States is number 4.
Huh.
Vietnam is number 3.
That's wild.
Nigeria is number 2. And the number 1 country for adoption, India, is number 1, right, in 2023. And that's surprising, right? Like, for me, I was kind of blown away when I saw that.
Do you see that? Like, I mean, you live in India. Do you see it on the streets? Yeah. Is this like happening in corporate? Where is this happening?
So, interesting story. It's interesting to me. So when we started recording these episodes, I kind of went out, and I live about an hour and a half outside of New Delhi, right? And so It's not as developed. It's a little bit further out. And I thought, let me go. I know some of the people who are out, who have store owners, business owners. And I said, let me just go and meet some of them. And there's a couple of young guys who have their own businesses. And I was talking to them. I'd say young guys, meaning they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And I'm talking to them. And this conversation came up about crypto.
Okay.
And I had one of the young men said to me, he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, oh, I bought Bitcoin in like 2017.
Nice.
And I'm thinking, man, you bought Bitcoin, like, seriously? You bought Bitcoin back when?
Sure.
And he was like, yeah, you know what? I bought it and then I sold it and I made some money. I wish I was holding on to it. But at that moment, I started to think, I said, this is a thing here.
Yeah.
People, and maybe it's because of technology. Maybe it's because of, India's always, for many, many years. I mean, you have a ton of engineers and you have computer engineers and you have people who are kind of, a little bit ahead in terms of development. And that's, a space that for a very long time, right? Like those are the people who were kind of in and you knew what was going on. And this conversation's been going on for a bit. So yeah, it is. Everybody that I have talked to has an opinion one way or the other. There's no gray area.
It's true.
You either think like, man, I would love to be able to do it. Yeah. And that those people tend to be younger. True. And then the older folks say, oh, that's like, criminals use it and it's used for money laundering. And, the government needs to crack down on it and all this kind of stuff. Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of where it's at. However, India's right now the largest country in terms of adoption. Yeah. Right.
That's amazing.
What do we do then? Yeah.
It's interesting. What about from like a regulatory standpoint? Are they seeing this and thinking, oh, this is the wave and we can capitalize on it? Or are they like America and kind of like, oh, deer in the headlights? What are they doing?
Yeah. You know what? I have strong opinions on this because I always think about it that especially the two countries. So I'm an American citizen and I have dual citizenship in India. And I see both countries, and I imagine that as this pizza pie was coming onto their dinner table, they're probably thinking about how do I get my 40% of this pie?
Yeah.
Rather than looking at it and saying, how do we create an environment where we can encourage development, where we can facilitate stuff, create a really healthy environment to see it grow?
Yeah.
The sense is, how do I get a piece of this thing?
Hmm.
Which I think you will agree that in the UAE, it's just the opposite.
I mean, it is the opposite. And there's such a sense of optimism living in the UAE because you can feel it from anybody. It's like, hey, we can do anything. And I think it probably had a very similar sense to America decades ago. Now, I feel like America is just like, it's us against them and they're trying to screw us, and whatever side you're on, you're like, yeah, and we're all surviving and our kids are screwed. That sucks. And I think it grates against everybody. And I think it's I think it's damaging to your spirit and your soul. But to live in a place like the UAE where it's like, yeah, what do you want to do? What are your hopes and dreams? And how we want to help you do that. Now, that is so freeing. They do want like, oh yeah, we're going to charge you for it. But we want you to be successful, not just so we can get taxes, but we want to see our economy grow. We want to be known for more than just oil. Let's do it. And it is, I would say, such a striking difference. And it's really, really a cool place to be living in. And so do you feel like India is not like that?
Yeah, I think that I think there's a real misunderstanding, right, in India. So you have, again, I mentioned how we see this older community who thinks that it's all about money laundering and all about, how it's very risky to invest in cryptocurrencies.
Sure.
And they look at it from that perspective. So high risk, so stay away from it. And so I think that is the message that has permeated even in the government, right? And you hear some voices who are saying, no, that's not the case, and we need to look at this. But those who are like, part of the RBI or, those who are setting policy are saying, no, this is absolutely something that's terrible. We heard, I think this past week about how tokenization is really, and blockchain is really great, but cryptocurrency and investments are terrible, and we need to regulate that. And so the taxes are really high. I think it's like 30%, right? And
On
there's
all crypto.
And there's
if
no
you
like
buy it and
offset
sell it,
for
30%.
losses.
Oh.
And there's it's trending now on X where it's reduced crypto tax, I think, and it's for India specifically that we started to see that. But when you hear people in leadership talk about like it's money laundering or it's high risk, I see stuff like it's not tied to anything, like it's kind of imaginary.
Sure.
And my immediate thought is, have you been paying attention to fiat currency for the last 50 years, right? Have you been paying attention to how it's freely printed, how pallets of cash show up in places? Like, I think that there was a study done where recently, or a report where they reported, like, I think it was like Elizabeth Warren said something like $900,000 in crypto, was like money laundering through crypto made it to somewhere like 900,000. But then later it was shown that $900 billion of fiat currency was used, but she didn't talk about the 900 billion. She talked about the 900,000. And there's this misunderstanding, not only about technology, right, that underlies a lot of this stuff, but kind of where we are in time today, where we are in terms of and I think people are starting to question, and they're starting to push back and saying, wait a minute, there's a disconnect here. Right. And so when people start making those kind of like arguments, I'm like, man, you need to do a little bit more, like you need to go and learn about fiat currency a little bit more before you have this conversation. And when that's happening in government leadership, when you see, talking about it that way, and you're like, it's either an agenda or you're not educated enough to speak into this.
Yeah. And I don't think we're talking about American politicians and Indian politicians are similar. Like the majority of politicians aren't idiots. They just have an agenda. And if it doesn't fit into their agenda, then they will say stupid things. Like it's only money laundering and it's only paid terrorists and like like if you're like, really? Oh, okay. And you're like, well, Elizabeth Warren said it was bad. Like then that's all I need to know about you. Like sadly means you don't think for yourself, you don't research, and you watch a lot of cable TV. Great. I don't really need to have a conversation with you because you don't take life seriously. And I think that's one of the big things about blockchain, Bitcoin, etc., and the possibilities of other cryptos is that it's decentralized most of the time, unless it's like, okay, so let's talk about Bitcoin. It's decentralized. It's on a ledger. You can look at the original Genesis block. You can look at everything, and it's just there. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to be like, hey, America just gave $6 billion to Iran, or how many $1 billion to Ukraine? Who took it? I mean, I just saw a headline where it's like all these dudes in Ukraine took the money that America sent, put it in their pocket. It's like, we have no way to account for that. Sorry, you just have to trust us. Screw that. Like, and I think enough people are like, yeah, you're right. This is ridiculous. And it feels like we're on the slow hill up where people are like understanding blockchain, understanding Bitcoin, understanding big government against small government. And it's like, yeah, you have to do a little bit of research, use your own brain, and then you can start to see where we're heading.
Yeah, I think that I'm at a place in my life that I would much rather bank in a trustless system than in a system that requires trust.
No, so
right. And for those who, if you're watching this episode, if you don't understand the concepts or the difference between the two, there's a ton of information out there, or you can just send us just ask the question if you don't know, and we could explain that. Maybe that's a future episode, but I think that it is a really fundamental, right? It's a fundamental concept, right? Trustless versus trust, right? Relationship in this. And I don't think that those who are making these decisions, now remember, they're going to be responsible for policy and regulatory decisions, right? Yeah. On how this moves forward. And if they don't understand those simple things, then it's a really long road.
Yeah.
Right. And
so I
think
that's the thing is like, Bitcoin gives you such a long-term perspective. Like maybe a long time ago, you could get in and get rich quick and sell and whatever. But if you think about it from the perspective of, let's not think in 6 months, let's think in 6 years, let's think in decades. That also helps you mature as a human being to think, I don't need instant gratification. But it also thinks about, I get the thumbs up. It also brings us even into like India and America and thinking, hey, let's not try to regulate this for right now in the next 3 months. Let's think about 10 years from now. And what are our kids doing with blockchain? And what are the rails that we are going on? Instead of like what you're saying, how can we get our 30%, our 40% piece? And how can we actually use this like the Emirates are doing to leverage people and see their dreams and visions and what it can be for the greater good in society and not just this small term perspective?
Well, and when I came out to Blockchain Live 2023 and I was out there, I was kind of in awe of what was happening, because here was an environment where, and I think the way that I described it, I was like, man, this is like the Silicon Valley of crypto, because they were saying, if you are looking to do this, come here, right? We are creating this environment, this space where you can build and come with your ideas, your vision, and we are going to support you to build that. And as soon as I heard that, my most immediate thought was, people are going to leave, companies are going to leave the US.
Yeah.
Companies are going to leave, right? Countries that have not caught on to this vision, and they're going to turn and be like, forget it. Why am I going to continue to do business here?
Yeah.
right? It makes zero sense for us to continue to do business here when there is this other place and other places I just listed. We went through 10 places where adoption is high. They're really understand it. Now, you know the interesting thing about this list that we just shared, the 10 of them. There's really only one that is a major economic force in the West.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sorry, I kind of discount Ukraine because I think there's some funny stuff going on over there. Right. However, 8 of those 10 are all in the East. They're in South Asia. There's in Africa, or like, in India. So it's not even in the West anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so think about it. If there are 8 out of 10, and if I go through the list of 20, there's more than that who are in the Eastern Hemisphere. What does 20 years look like? What does 10 years from now look like?
That's what I was just going to talk about. I mean, if you think about like where we are on the economic system globally, and let's say Bitcoin does what you and I and many other people think it's going to do in the next 10 years, even. All of a sudden, it's going to take the whole global economic system and just flip it on its head to where you're like, Vietnam has how much GDP going on? Like what?
Right.
Or you're El Salvador, where Bitcoin is legal tender and all of these other things. And it's going to catch a lot of people that are just watching cable TV and being like, whatever, to being like, all of a sudden, like, what's going on? And I do think that's like one of if you're in the space, if you're in the system, yeah, you need to do your own research, but you also need to help just other people educate and just be like, hey, this is the next thing. It's the thing now, but it's coming and it's building. And I've had people like you say, so you're probably either for crypto / Bitcoin or you're against it because you either got burned or you see what's coming. And it's like, I have a neighbor and we were talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm into Bitcoin and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, I was in it and my brother got me into it and then I lost a bunch of money. Okay. Then that can happen. And that's a lot of people. But at the same time, if you look at it from that long-term perspective, you only lose money if you sell. And that's up to you. You don't have to sell. But if you can think instead of like, oh, I put $2,000 in now, or like in 21, and now I'm down $1,000. Too bad, I lost that money. No, you still have the same. Let's say we're talking about Bitcoin. You still have the same amount of Bitcoin. Like just think longer term than like 2 years, 3 years. And in traditional finance, we're so used to like say the stock market and I got 10%, I got 15%, and then a down year like 2 years ago and you were down like whatever 15%. We're like used to those levels and we're not used to these big swings. And it's just got to be that long-term perspective of if you can see it and if you can see where the future is going, then you need to learn for yourself, but you also need to tell other people like, hey, this is what's happening. And it's bigger than just price. We just love to think of price. And I love that we're at the fact of like today, Bitcoin is like $43,000 and it's so boring because it's that like, $40,000, it's just stuck, or $35,000. And if we all zoomed back 5 years, it'd be like, you're going to be bored when it's $40,000. Like, wow, crazy.
So can I just say, it's so funny. I didn't even know it was at 43 today, to be honest with you. I didn't look because for me, I think I've stopped looking at that and I've looked at how much do I have? Like, I need to be like, need to be buying more. I'm not really too as concerned about, it's nice.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the view is, and I think you're kind of alluding to it, right? So traditional finance, right? When they talk about building wealth, they're not talking about day to day. I'm going to be day trading and I'm going to be like every day looking at it and buying and selling it, buying and selling. right? When you talk you go to a financial advisor, if someone's looking at your portfolio, they're going to say, we're going to invest in some index fund, or we're going to look at something. And those aren't those that you're sitting there and saying, I'm going to just trade every day. But no, you're putting your money in.
Right.
And you have a really long view of it, right? Because you're talking about wealth, right? We're not talking about money. We're talking about wealth, right? And so I think that's a staple that when you talk to traditional finance people who are investing, they'll tell you this is the path to wealth.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we look at crypto. People are like, I need to buy and sell. I need to buy and sell. And then I bought it and I lost money. And and so now I'm out.
Perspective, right?
Yeah. Rather than saying, you know what, I bought it, I'm going to hold it.
Yeah.
I got a very long view of it, like I would if I was in traditional investing. I'm going to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And so that I made a big investment, right, in November 2021 to jump in, and literally the week after, I lost like 60%.
Right.
And I decided to hold on to it.
Yeah.
I'm still holding on to it. In fact, I have more now.
Yeah.
Right. Than I did then. And you know what? Every time when I hear someone say, oh, the market's down right now, and I go, perfect time to buy.
Perfect.
Right? Like, I'm going to keep buying. I'm not selling. Right? Like, that's my strategy. I'll keep buying.
Yeah.
I would say, just in our, if Michael Saylor is saying that he keeps buying, I probably will continue to buy.
It's so good because if you look at what smart people do that. Michael Saylor, we haven't talked about Michael Saylor a lot, but he's kind of one of the patron saints of Bitcoin. But if you study what he's done through history, back in 2000, he saw Apple, Google, all the big ones are a big deal. Amazon, I'm just going to buy those. And that's what he did. And so he became fabulously wealthy doing that. Fast forward to 2020. So 20 years later, he saw that Bitcoin, which he saw in like 2013, and you can look up an old tweet of his, and it's like, Bitcoin is trash. But then he did the research. He realized, hey, all that benefits, started buying. And so has a company called MicroStrategy, which owns a huge percentage of Bitcoin. And if smart guy, like smarter than you and I, this dude graduated MIT, all the things, and like is not an idiot. And if he is doing this, maybe you should pay attention. Like look at what all the smart people, not just what they say, what are they doing? And we've talked about that with Jamie Dimon, with so many other things. They might say one thing, but what are they really doing? See what they're doing. That's a really good point.
Absolutely. 100% of the time. And so it's funny because Michael Saylor and Jamie Dimon, if you put them on a screen together, side by side, they will say two opposite things, right? Michael Saylor will say, buy, buy, buy. Jamie Dimon will he is like down on Bitcoin. He's like, don't ever talk to me about this again. But then if you look what they're both doing, they're both doing the same thing. And what they're doing is they're buying Bitcoin, right?
Exactly.
And so which to me is really where we should be paying attention to.
Yeah. And I want to transition that into what is happening in traditional finance and market. And so we've talked a little bit over the last months about the ETF launching. And I just saw a really interesting stat. So this is, and I'm going to share it here. This is what happened in the first 9 days. And a lot of people were really upset about what is happening with the ETFs, because if you were really paying attention to price, when the ETFs in America got approved, shot up to like 48.5, and everybody's like, oh, it's going to blow into 60. And then all of a sudden it's sell off, down to, I think the low was 39 recently. And people are like, oh, what is the deal? And so this chart's super interesting because it shows all of the ETFs and what they've been buying. So FBTC is Fidelity, IBIT is BlackRock. And within 9 days, like if you study ETFs, like not many people do, but if you're the nerd in the crowd and you're like, oh man, I know the history of ETFs, the Bitcoin ETFs have blown every other ETF launch out of the water. Like there's been more capital that has inflowed into BTC. And I think the theme of today is have a long-term perspective, and longer than like a week. But let's think about this right now. And if you can see my chart, it says that like Fidelity right here has bought almost 2 billion. IBIT, BlackRock has bought almost 2 billion. And this is all inflow in the blue, but the outflow was Grayscale, and Grayscale was locked up. They have the higher percentage. I think they're charging 1.5%. And a lot of people, there's various reasons. You can look them all up. I'm not going to explain all the reasons why Grayscale has been outflowing, but there's a lot of reasons they've been outflowing. And so they have been selling, which brings the price down. And this is about to dry up because the outflows, they just don't have as much Bitcoin as is being bought up. And so really they're meeting in the middle. And at some point, Grayscale is going to dry up, but all of these others are going to continue to buy, which basic supply and demand means if all of a sudden the supply is less and less and the demand is still there, the price is going to go up. And so this is just after 9 days. Think about where it's going to be in 9 months or 9 years. If companies like this are demanding, and this is just like one segment of the market, like where are we going to be in 9 years? It blows my mind to think about.
You know, I've heard all kinds of different numbers, right? Because everybody is very much tied into the price, right? And everybody's really, and that's what drives people, I think, in terms of that demand, right? Right now, and so they're looking at it, and I've heard from 100,000, I've heard 150,000, I've heard like $1 million, right? It's all over the place, right? However, if you again have a long view to this, and I think to understand, especially, I mean, we're talking about Bitcoin here's use cases. If you're talking about, retaining value in an asset, if you're talking about just we're talking about a lot of different things. We're not just talking about simply from an investment perspective, right? Like what it means. Then regardless if it goes to 100 or 1 million, it is important, right? In my opinion, this is what I speak to my kids about. I tell my sons, you need to learn about blockchain, right? You need to understand about Bitcoin. You need to understand how it all works and how it ties together, because in 10, 15, 20 years, this is going to be regular life for you.
Yes.
Right. And so it goes beyond just that one narrow discussion.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that people need to make that adjustment and say, you know what, I need to be in it. And so I saw some, a discussion happening on X today, and it was someone who's not invested in crypto. And they were saying, is this something, should I buy Bitcoin? And you had people who were saying there, oh, it's, fake, or, I would stay away from it. And, maybe if you want to just put like, a couple $1,000s into it, and really kind of pushing this person away from traditional finance, right? Financial investment. And I stepped in and I said, listen, try to get to 1 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be your only goal, right?
Yeah.
Try to get to 1 Bitcoin. And I suggested, I said, listen, DM me if you want to ask questions about it. If it's a legit, are you asking, this is a legit question.
Right.
Don't waste my time if you just want to get people to start a discussion.
Right.
No. Yeah, but get to 1 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know what? You will it's kind of like, hey, if somebody said to you when Amazon was initially, when they first had their IPO, and if we knew what we know today, I'd say, listen, drop $1,000 in it.
Right. Or $10,000.
Or $10,000.
Whatever you can do.
Right, whatever you can do, right? But
yeah,
the same way, we're in one of those periods where we go, listen, if you have 10K sitting around, drop it in there.
Yeah, please.
Right? Just
Please
track the last 10 years of Bitcoin.
look at the chart. That's it.
Look at the chart. Put 10 grand in there. And if you don't like what it does in the next 2 years,
Change it.
money out.
Big deal. I think that, again, we're talking about long-term perspective, and I want to close with this. When these ETFs got launched, I have 2 retirement accounts with 2 different companies. And I decided I'm going to keep one in a traditional finance. And then I talked to the other company that I'm with. I've been with for 20 years. And my father is an amazing man, has done well financially on limited income. But when I was 20, he said, hey, start saving for retirement. Put whatever you can in, $20 a month. And I was like, okay. So I started doing that, and I met this financial guy, and he opened Roth IRA for me and all these things. And so through years, I've done that. But I decided when these ETFs got launched and did the research, I'm like, I can basically double my Bitcoin if I put in an ETF. And so I went to this financial advisor and I said, hey, I think I'm going to all my funding with you. I'm going to roll with the traditional one. But for me, I have this deep conviction in Bitcoin. It's just going to keep going up. And so I'm going to buy the ETF. How can I do that with you? And he's like, well, we can't do that because such and such. And he's like, let me email somebody. So I give him a week. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if he can figure out in a week. And so he sends me back a couple of emails. Oh, we're still doing due diligence. And so after a week, I said, hey, I'm sorry, man. I've had this guy for 20 years. I said, I'm moving all mine to Fidelity because I can, without any penalties, I can keep my Roth IRA, just stick it all in Bitcoin. And he gave me the reasons why I shouldn't. I said, hey, thanks. I appreciate it. And I did it. And I was having a conversation with my mom about it. And she's like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And I said, hey, look, I've done the research. I put the hours in. Bitcoin is real, tangible money. And the other option is fiat currency that the US dollar is just going to continue to debase. And so in 20 years, will Bitcoin be worth more or less than what fiat currency can give me? In my deepest conviction, I believe that in 20 years, when I'm 59, I can go to that account and pull out millions of dollars in fiat if I decide to, or I can just keep it there. But I have so much more conviction in Bitcoin than the US dollar. It's not even a question to me right now. And so it's not even about the price today or even the price in 10 years. I deeply believe because of the fundamentals of Bitcoin, it's just going to keep going up. Same way Michael Saylor does, the same way the smartest people in the room do. And it's not even a question to me. And so traditional finance that does not see that, like this company I used to have, or your Vanguards, or all of these that are saying, well, we're not going to allow you to put money into a top 10 asset in the world. Why? Because it's new and we can't control it. Okay. Again, that's all I need to know. I don't need to do business with you. That's fine. I don't even need to have a conversation with you because you haven't done the research and you haven't seen the fundamentals and you believe in big government. Sweet. Good for you. It's just amazing.
I'm with you 100%. When they say, companies like Vanguard or Grayscale are saying like, we're not going to participate. And, my immediate thought is, this is a top 10, asset. And you're not going to, it would be similar to them saying, hey, you know what? We don't really believe in Apple. So we're not going to invest in Apple. And I would be like, you're out of your mind, right? Like, why wouldn't you put my money into some of these blue chip, right? Investments.
Sure.
Like, oh, we don't believe in it. I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, now this is, I think it's like number 10 right now with Bitcoin. And for them to say that they wouldn't do it is kind of nuts to me. And so like when I hear like Vanguard saying that they are not taking it seriously, in fact, they're saying that, it's worthless, I think they might have said. my immediate thought was Vanguard is having their Xerox Kodak moment right now. And and so, those who might be watching the episode say, I don't understand that reference, Xerox and Kodak. Well, Xerox and Kodak companies were these huge multi-billion-dollar companies that did not see the technology, did not continue to grow and develop, right? And because they didn't make those adjustments in their thinking, they're no longer relevant anymore. Well, Vanguard, if you don't make that adjustment, you're going to be irrelevant.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how many months it'll take, because at some point they will capitulate. Right. They'll open it up. But you're exactly right. We are at the VHS to DVD point. We are at the internet opening. We are at going from Walkman to MP3 players. Like, we're at that moment. And so if you can see it, you can do really well. If you can't see it, you're going to be playing catch up for a long time, whether it's traditional finance, whether it's governments, all of the things. You need to just do some research and take a step back and think. We're not thinking the next 3 to 6 months. We're thinking the next 3 to 6 to 20 years. Think that way.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are using your iPhone, just remember, or you may not remember, but before that, it was the BlackBerry. And those of you who don't remember the BlackBerry, I think that's probably a good example.
It's true. Did you have a BlackBerry?
I did have a BlackBerry.
Did you watch the BlackBerry movie?
I did not watch the
You should watch it. You would like it. Any of that kind of historical stuff that deals with technology, I'm into. But I watched I don't even remember. I'd have to Google what it's called, but it's like the beginning of BlackBerry. But then, and it's great. They go through, like, they launch and all the things. And then at the end, they are watching iPhone get released. And they're like, oh no, what do we do? And they can't transfer because they didn't see ahead, and they stuck to what? Keyboards and what it was. Correct. And it's the same shift. If they could have adapted, they'd still be around.
Correct.
But they didn't.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where we're at. And I think, though, that we're at that point with not only in terms of these large financial investment institutions like Vanguard and Grayscale, but we're seeing, BlackRock and Fidelity's who are kind of on board and seeing this. Not only are we seeing that over there, but we're also seeing that in the governments, right? So we're seeing that with, like, India and the United States, and we're starting to see companies and just individuals shifting their focus to different countries that you never thought about.
Yeah.
Right. Of like, hey, this might, and so I think that we're at that inflection point right now. And people need to get on board. Right. And hopefully, I'm glad to say that you and I are on board. Yeah. And this has been a really exciting time.
No, I love it. I'm glad we get to do it. I think it's hilarious that an hour ago we were like, what are we going to talk about today? And then it's like, I think we're on minute 48. So, and it's been a good episode. I would listen to it.
It has been good. Anyway, Andrew, do you want any last words?
Oh, man. You should get to a Bitcoin. Try to think about it not in dollar amount, but in how much you're stacking. So if you can stack sats, that'd be awesome. It's going to be good, not for you, but maybe for your kids and your grandkids. So do
absolutely.
that.
The last thought for me, as I think state all the time, educate yourself, right?
Yep.
Educate yourself and then make a decision. You're going to ask people who have no idea what they're talking about. Take some time to go learn yourself and then make a sound decision for you.
Love it.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
Take care.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye. You are listening to HardKnock Crypto. New episodes drop every Friday.